Hey, everybody. I hope you had a great Thanksgiving and welcome back to part two with Bill Dance. I mean, you can imagine a kid that loved fishing his whole life looking up to the Hank Parker, Jimmy Houston, and Bill Dance the day, man. Those were my legends, my heroes. And I'm so lucky, so blessed to have them on Fish Tales now. And so Bill was talking about Jack McCarran. And the key thing here is it was his very first sponsor, Stren Monofilament, back in the day. Bill was using Stren, and he talks about in the last episode how he forged a relationship by getting a hold of Jack. That leads us into the television, the early days of television, and how Outdoors with Bill Dance, which changed its title to Bill Dance with Outdoors, he's going to explain why, all started with Jack McCarran. So there's that part of the show coming up right now, the second part of our two-part series with Bill Dance. If you get a chance, please like, comment, and subscribe to Fish Tales if you don't mind. I'm looking through the comments. I like responding to the people and seeing what they have to say. And if you subscribe every single week, Livingston Lures is going to give away a $100 pro pack of Livingston Lures each week to the new subscribers. So every single week we're looking through the subscribers, and then Livingston, the IT guys over there, are picking out one particular person that subscribed that week, and we're sending them off a $100 pro pack. So we'll get a hold of you if you win that. Now back to the show with Bill Dance. Pamela, Bill, thank you guys so much for all the pictures you submitted and got us for the show. And you guys are great. It's been a wonderful joy working with the dances. And here we go with Bill Dance, part two.
You're dialed in to Byron Velvick's Fish Tales. Real talk, real tactics, and the stories that make it all worthwhile. Byron Velvick's Fish Tales is brought to you by Livingston Lures, Trika Fishing, Mercury Outboards, and Camus Boats. Without further ado, here's Byron.
Well, Jack lived up to his word. He, about 2 years later, we started a local show in the Memphis market, a Friday night fishing show that we talked about conservation, we talked about how to, we talked about area lakes, and we had special guests on the show. But it was kind of a corny deal, you know. We had two recliners, and we didn't, back then, we were shooting film, not tape. And you'd have to edit it all, you know, you piece it together. But anyway, every Friday night, I'd go around the area lakes and I'd shoot stuff. And I was in a tournament or something, I'd do stuff. We got a call from their sister station in Jackson, Mississippi, which was an ABC affiliate also. And they said, "Would you do a show for us?" And I said, "Sure." And it was good because the state capitol was in Jackson. I could draw from boating. I could draw people from boating. I could draw the governor loved to fish. Game and Fish was there. And I could pull guests from there to talk about game and fish laws, conservation issues, everything. And I knew several fishermen in the area, and I'd bring them in and talk about fishing. And it wasn't long after that, there was a station, another ABC affiliate in Baton Rouge, WBRZ. So WBRZ, Channel 2, I went there and I started doing a show. Then I got a call from J.C. Penney in Paducah, Kentucky. And believe it or not, they sold sporting goods at that time. And he said, "Would you do a show for us?" So I said, "Yeah." I didn't realize how deep I was getting into this. And so I was doing 4 markets, 52 weeks a year. So 4 times that amount, 4 times 52 is 208. I was doing
Gosh.
208. I was shooting my own footage. I was editing my own shows. I was picking my own.
Was this called Bill Dance Outdoors? Was it
Well,
Bill
hey,
Dance Outdoors at the time?
I'm glad you said that. It was called Outdoors with Bill Dance back then. And I kept that name for a period, and I got a call from in St. Louis, John Stork. He said, "How would you like to syndicate your show?" And I said, "What's involved?" And he told me. And I gave my show to Bobby Metters. You may have met Bobby when you fished tournaments. He lived in Baton Rouge. He was a guest on the show several times there, and I gave him the show. And Ernest Neely from Jackson, I gave him the show. I dropped the show in Paducah, and I continued with the Memphis show, and, um, it rocked along, uh, pretty good for a period of time. It went through the syndication, dropped Memphis, and went totally with syndication. And we syndicated that first year about 50 network markets. Then the second year, we went up to 90 network markets.
Wow.
Shortly after that, Byron, the cost of syndication kind of skyrocketed. And we started looking around at cable, and cable was just beginning to come on. And we went with ESPN, and we put the show on ESPN. Demographically, I mean, I was everywhere. I went in Canada. I mean, the show was everywhere. I mean, from Miami to Raleigh, New York to Minneapolis to Toronto to Spokane to San Diego to Austin, Dallas, all through the
Wow.
Midwest and then to the Southeast. But we did that, but the demographics just weren't there. And a little network over in Nashville, Tennessee, Opryland, they TNN, the Nashville network. Well, I made a call with David Hall, who was program director, and I went over to Nashville and I talked to him. He said, "We'll take your show." And that changed Bill Dance Outdoors, or Outdoors with Bill Dance, to a different degree. We picked up sponsors like Walmart, Chevrolet, Purina, and the demographics were so good. Uh, we had bull riding, we had NASCAR racing, we had outdoors, we had hunting, fishing, and so back then we had a little magazine that went out, and you could find it in all these jump and go little stores and 7-Elevens. And I grabbed one time. I told somebody the show came on at 9 o'clock
Yeah.
on Saturdays, and it didn't. And he said, "I missed it. I didn't see it." And I said, "Well, let me look." And I looked at that outdoor guide, a little
TV guide.
publication thing,
Okay. Yeah.
and yeah, it said outdoors. So I talked to Stork. He said the reason they do that, they just don't have room to put outdoors with Bill Dance. I said, "Okay, we're going to change it. We're going to change it to Bill Dance Outdoors." And that's what we did. They didn't have
Wow.
room to write all in that publication they had.
I did a show, and the same thing happened on a TV show I did right after The Bachelor, and it was called. I wanted to go through the eyes of the guide. That was going to be the name of the show, was Through the Eyes of the Guide, because I thought that was a cool name. And they said no, it has to be Guide's Eyes because there's not enough room. Like you're saying, if it just says outdoors, by the time they get to Bill Dance, your name's not even there. And Through the Eyes of the Guide was going to be this really cool name of a show because I was doing it about guides, but the line would go through the the eyes of the guide. I thought it was cool, but they go, it just doesn't work for for what you're talking about, which is that rolling screen. But so that's how Bill Dance Outdoors came to be called Bill Dance Outdoors.
Yeah, we changed it. Uh, it's kind of like a Reader's Digest, but it was a TV guide thing they put out every week. And when I changed it, I think it helped the show, picked up more viewers. But anyway, we rocked along with TNN for 15 years, and you had country western people. You could draw anybody, for guests, country western entertainers, and I did shows with a lot of people probably won't even remember it, but Porter Wagner,
Hmm.
Mel Tillis,
Mel
uh,
Tillis.
Roy Clark, Loretta Lynn, Jerry Clowers, Jerry Reed, a lot of these entertainers that were on the Nashville network. But somehow, some way, long about the 16th year, Gaylord Enterprises started changing, and they got rid of TNN, and so we moved to a little network in Connecticut called the Outdoor Channel.
Mhm.
Same one as the one now. But anyway, we stayed there about a year, and it kind of crumbled. So I moved to 4 networks. So I went to the Discovery Channel. We were airing on Discovery. We were airing on NBC Sports, the Outdoor Channel, and the Sportsman Channel. So we were airing on 4 networks. And the cost of NBC Sports was pretty high, and the Discovery Channel was pretty high. So our demographics were better with the Sportsman Channel and the Outdoor Channel. So got the idea shortly after several years of that, why not do a saltwater show? And I couldn't spell saltwater, but we did it. And I picked people that knew how to spell saltwater, just these good guys,
Right?
folks that I had met along the way. So we started doing Bill Dance Saltwater about 10 years ago, and it's been really successful for us. And then we started spending more time working on social media, and boom, everything started climbing, doing great. And social media, the way it is today, and the way what we do, um, it works out real good for us. So I'm still with those 2 channels, Sportsman Channel and the Outdoor Channel.
I have it in my notes here. You've done 2,000 or more television shows. Do you have a number of how many shows? Because I think you said 1968 is when you started doing the TV shows, if I'm not mistaken, but maybe it was even earlier than 1968 that you were doing Bill Dance Outdoors in some version of it. But would you say it's fair that you've done 2,000 shows now?
Oh, we've done a ton of them. I don't
Hey, how did the bloopers
somebody
start?
said we'd done 2,500. We've been on the air 56 years.
Ah, 56
56
years you've
years.
been on the air? Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
And with Sportsman Channel and the Outdoor Channel, we run 52 weeks a year. So we pick up some of it's rerun. I believe it is. It's 50. Pam, she could tell me.
Yeah.
58 years, I think.
How did you come up with the idea of doing the bloopers? Because I mean, this is a worldwide phenomenon. Bill Dance bloopers. I think you've done 4 episodes, 4 full episodes of bloopers. At one point, you had an idea that you have so much stuff, so many funny outtakes that therein lied a show just of the crazy stuff that happened to you. And you're doing your straight up fishing show, but now you have something go awry. And famously, I mean, I've had bloopers all over my shows, and we all talk about Bill Dance. We're like, that's got to be a blooper reel. That's got to be a blooper reel. And it's in homage to you and what you created by just deciding, hey, we got so much good, funny content. And that took off like wildfire. I see that took off like wildfire for you.
Well, that blooper thing, it started by accident. I was with Walmart at the time, and I got a call from Sporty Goods, the Sporty Good buyer there, and he said, "Bill, you did a show on a porco. It was a strip of pork that would undulate in the water as you moved it along." And he said, we overbought on that bait. Is there any way you could do another show on it?" And I said, Dick Mahan, I said, "Dick, I hate to rerun a show." And he said, "Well, think about it. Everybody doesn't get to see the show the first time. Sometimes they see it the first time, they'll watch it again, and then you'll pick up new viewers on the rerun." I said, so anyway, I did it. And we sold more the second time than we did the first time of this bait. Strike King was making it. It was called a Strike King Porco.
Mhm.
Anyway, they called me again for the third quarter and said, "Can you possibly do it again? Our buyer just overbuys on it because it sells so well when you promote it." So I said, "Okay." So I went out and it was cold. I remember that. It was a bad day. The front had come through and had high skies. And I fished and fished and fished and fished, force feed fish. And I caught 6 fish uh, all day. And I had to get it back and get it edited and get it to the network. So I said, Tony, our producer, I said, "How can't, I don't know, how can we fill this show? I don't have," he said, "I got an idea." Well, what he had been doing was taking outtakes from out of the archives of the shows that we had done and just storing them. But he pulled, I didn't know he was doing it, but he pulled uh, enough shows to fill up the second half of that show on the Porco for Walmart. And Walmart liked it. They sold a bunch of baits and they liked got a lot of comments on the blooper that Tony had pulled.
Gotcha.
Well, he said, he called me about a week later and he said, "I just got a call from Dick Clark Productions in New York. They want to buy some of your blooper tapes." I said, "Well, we're not going to sell it to them. We'll let them have it." And Dick Ed McMahon, you remember Ed? It was Johnny
Yeah.
Carson's host.
Yeah, Ed
Okay,
McMahon, the co-host of Johnny Carson.
yeah. Well, they did a show together for Super Bloopers and Practical Jokes, and they ran those bloopers on the network on NBC, and got a tremendous response. And they called and they said, "Oh, we want about 4 more." I said, "We're not going to charge you. We have to pay. If we do that, we have to pay for it." So I said, "Okay." Well, it wasn't long. We got a call from Crook and Chase, who were doing a show, and then Rogan's Heroes in California was doing started a blooper show, and the BBC in London had a blooper show. So we furnished tapes to all of them to run on their blooper shows or outtake shows. And
Wow.
so then Tony got it out and we made a tape, a videotape, and Walmart bought that tape and sold the pants off of it. I mean, they sold, I don't know how many they sold. And so by then he had enough outtakes to do a blooper two. So we did a blooper two. And over a course of 15 years, we had 4 blooper tapes, and we took outtakes like with Terry Bradshaw, uh, goof ups, uh, did a show with him in an orange grove, stealing oranges in Florida. And we typed it, "Once a stealer, always a stealer." And
That's
we
great.
had, we had uh, entertainers, and uh, we had a pile of those that we'd done with, Tillis and Reed and Clowers and Porter Wagner and Loretta and uh, Conway Twitty and I don't know, just a bunch. But anyway, we we rocked along with it, and it got better and better and better.
I had Earl Bentz on this show, and we were talking about you. Earl was talking Earl Bentz from Now Camus Boats, and Earl had a great history of when he met you, and so you were a part of the podcast in the subject. But then Earl told a funny story, a blooper that never made it to your show. I heard back in the day when you were going 100 miles an hour, you went to a tournament and you forgot to take your boat with you. Is that true? Do you you didn't hook your boat up to your truck? You drove all the way to a tournament. Go ahead. I got to hear it.
It wasn't a tournament. It was I've done it twice. I did it twice.
Oh,
Hey,
no.
I'm serious. I drove to Pickwick Lake, which is an hour and 20 minutes from my house, and I saw Mississippi. I go down through North Mississippi and then hook back up, go north up to Pickwick Dam, um, and I had a place there on Pickwick. But when I made that turn, a Mississippi Highway patrolman went by, and I looked in the rearview mirror and I said, "Did you turn around?" And I can't remember who was with me. I think it was Max, another buddy of mine. He said, "No, he's going straight. Something doesn't look right." And I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, I said, "Did you turn around?" He said, "No." And I looked in the rearview mirror and I said, "I don't see him." He said, "There's something else you don't see." And I said, "What's that?" He said, "Where's the boat?" And I went, "What? The boat? Where's the boat?"
Oh
And
my gosh.
hey, I did. I went off and left the boat. And then there was another time much closer. I forgot my tackle box one time, and Diane brought it to me. Uh, she was coming in the same direction where we were. And there was another time that 2 times I forgot my boat.
I can't
But
believe that.
what
I love that.
yeah, I overslept in a tournament one time at Guntersville. They they pulled up, everybody had the same kind of boat, and they pulled up in front of a lodge there where we were staying, the Alabama State Lodge, and they were honking the horn. And Diane said, "There's someone outside honking the horn." So I opened the door. They said, "Bill, are you gonna fish a tournament today?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Well, you better come on." I grabbed my clothes and I was getting dressed in the boat when we were going to the boat ramp. I
Yeah.
overslept.
I've learned a lot about you today, Bill. And one of the things that's impressing me is, you're talking about being probably the pioneer of deep water fishing. Like what you were doing was you were fishing deeper than all the other guys right from the start. And what I think a lot of the podcast people don't realize, there was no GPS back then. There was a topographical map, but you must have been the king of lining up landmarks. Like when you talk about those trees you were spooning on, and having other trees, you must have been really good at identifying stuff on the shoreline, being able to put you out there on the structure you were finding with your graph, and you were fishing deeper than almost all the guys from the very start, weren't you?
The what I got, I got a topo map, like a Pickwick, because that was a lake I was fishing a lot, but I was learning a lot by doing what I was doing. And I'd get a topo map, and I'd look at the interval lines, and I remember Glenn told me, he said, "Get the smallest interval that you could possibly get. A 5-foot's gonna show you more than a 10 or 20. And if you're fortunate enough to get a 5 with 2.5-foot auxiliary intervals, that'll get you to 2.5, you know, and when you find those tight lines running together, that's a quick drop." Well, I'd get out in the lake and I'd be piddling around and I'd see a good looking spot, maybe where a ditch ran into the Tennessee River or maybe uh, whatever. And so if fish were on it, I'd instantly drop a buoy right where the boat was. And I'd look north and I'd take 90-degree angles with my line compass with the map, and I'd shoot it this way, and it might be a tree, uh, a funny-looking tree on the bank, and up on the hill would be a red barn. Well, I'd get those two lined up in that direction, and I'd look maybe toward the dam, and there'd be a black buoy, uh, 4 lights off the end of the intake of the lock.
Right.
And so right then, with 2 90-degree fixes, and I could come back to that one spot without GPS or anything.
Hmm.
I knew my depth, but to get right there on that spot, I'd line that barn up with that tree, and I'd look about at 90 degrees, and I'd line that back buoy up with the 4th light on the road that came over the dam.
Right.
So I did that I did that for a long time, uh, and then I remember I was fishing Lawrence at the time, And uh, Carl, Carl used to call me, Carl Lawrence used to call me, and he was raising salamanders, and he wouldn't be talking about the units, the little green box. You
Right?
remember the little green fish
Yeah.
locator
Yep.
that Lawrence made? And I bet you got one. I do too.
No, yeah, this was not green, but this was the one I had as a kid, and this was my little Lowrance, but it wasn't green. I remember the old green ones, but about my generation, I got this little plastic one, and to your point, I love it because you're talking about the old classic stuff like the flashers,
Right. Well, this was a like a little tackle box. You popped it open, and you had transducer, you had your little dials and stuff. I used that for a while, and then Lawrence changed me, wanted me to start promoting Eagle. It was a new company they were coming with, Eagle Graphs. It was still owned by Lawrence, and I started using that, and it wasn't but a short period of time, I got a call from Gordon Strong at Lawrence, and he said, "We've got a new unit, and Daryl wants you." Daryl, Carl had passed away, and Daryl wants you to go with him to the Great Lakes and shoot a show on this new Eagle graph. And I said, "Okay," but it was a paper graph, and so I went up there and up to Washington Island, Wisconsin, and I met Daryl. And the key thing with this unit, the units that we were running had a 19-degree angle on them, 1 to 3, you know, 3 feet, 6 feet deep, it'd show 2 feet, 9 feet deep, it'd show 3 feet, 12 feet deep, it'd show, it was 3, 3, 3. But this one was a 45-degree angle. And I went, whoo. And it really showed the stuff. I mean, way out here. And it would draw it just just like a paper graph, like a heart monitor in a hospital going, across the screen.
Yeah.
Daryl and I went to, we started promoting it, and we went to East Tennessee. He came over, and we went over to Darce Lake fishing stripers. And I remember we were on this ledge, and we were using big shad, live shad, freelining them. And I remember on this ledge, I could see the shad. I could see the shad on this 45-degree angle scope. I said, "Look at that shad going." Daryl said, "Look what's happening." The shad was here, and you could see a striper coming up and actually hitting him. I mean,
Oh
actually hitting him.
man.
And then right,
Oh wow.
yeah. And that that was, and it was about a 50-pound, 45, 50-pound striper. And
Wow.
you could see the whole thing, but you could see him come up kinda like you can now with, live
The
scope and,
live scope,
uh
yeah, like the
yeah,
commercial we did for Garmin, the commercial for live scope and all that. I remember
right,
the paper graphs, and it was when I was a kid, I was in that wheelhouse of learning still when there was no GPS, when there was just primitive graphs and marker buoys. To your point, I had a bucket full of marker buoys, and I remember Don Ivino, one of the king. Don Ivino was one of the big guys out west fishing deep, and that paper graph, you'd smell that paper burning. That thing would be, like you said, a heart monitor, like you said. It would just be going chink, 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 chink. And I remember I was a kid fishing with my buddy Steve Oliver, Bill, and Don Ivino pulls up and he goes, "Take a look at this." And he opens up the live well and he shows us a 9-pounder in the live well. And then he shows us on the paper graph right where it was sitting there. To your point, there he still has the
yeah.
paper picture of that 9-pounder sitting on a ledge. And he says, "I saw that thing on this paper graph and I threw my worm out there. It got down to the break of that ledge and he catches a 9-pounder." I mean, I'm a kid and I'm blown away that we went from these flashers like you're talking about with Daryl Lawrence and them to those paper graphs. That was a big change right there.
Well, it had opened the field, the underwater field from this side to this, to that, like that. It'd be maybe from 19 degrees to 45 degrees. It had such a broad coverage area.
I talked to Pamela. We have a segment in the show, and this is a good time to do it. In your life, and it can be anything. It can be a TV show, it can be a fishing tournament, it could be a fish. But there's this cool segment, and you're gonna love this, Bill. It starts off with Jim Bitter at the Bassmaster Classic losing that fish on Bassmaster, that famous Jim Bitter moment where he fumbles that fish that cost him the Bassmaster Classic. And famously, we call the segment, the one that got away. And so for you, I'm curious of everything in your entire life, whether it was a sponsor, a show opportunity, maybe it was just a fish or a tournament. Bill, what for you is the one that you in your mind that got away?
The memory still haunts him. He lost by 2 ounces.
Well, that tournament was held on Clark Hill, I believe, in the Carolinas.
Yeah.
And we went out, we got the day of practice. Well, I found this creek. It was on the map. I didn't find it. I just went to it. But it meandered its way out to the Savannah River, and I followed it. And there was a big point on my left that angled out and just sloped right toward where this creek made a kind of a little U and dropped into the actual Savannah River channel. So I spun back around, and I eased up, and I started casting. And this was a classic, Bassmaster Classic tournament. So we could only carry 10 pounds of tackle with us. Well, you think about you going to a tournament, 10 pounds isn't anything. 10 pounds is a lot of stuff.
Right.
But I remember throwing 3 packages, and why I did it, I don't even know. I threw 3 packages of Bill Jackson's 6-inch purple and white dot floating worms. I know you've seen them. And in the tackle box. And when I got to that, running that point out, I said, it looks like fish at 32 foot. And so I spun around, and I rigged it South Carolina rig. And I threw it, went down, just moved it along, whoop, and I caught one. I went, threw it right back. It went down about 32 foot. I just pulled it, just reeled it real slow, kind of bumping it over stuff. And then, boop, one hit it, the line went taut. I caught him. I dummied the worm, and I threw back 3 more times and had 3 more hits. They just pulled the worm. And so now I've got a pack of 3. I've got 2 packs of 3 and 1 pack of 2. Like a dummy, I let him pull the worm off the hook. So Charlie Searcy from the Nashville, Tennessean, was the outdoor editor. He was my partner. And then Charlie moved on and started writing for the Chattanooga Times. And I pulled up on that point the day of the tournament, and I threw out there 32 foot, pulled nothing. Fanned it a little bit, nothing. And I said, doggone it. I bet those fish went out over the channel and suspended. Well, I just turned and I threw out deeper, 38 foot, and boop, I caught one. I caught another one, and I caught another one. From 38 to 42 feet, that's where they were. They just moved down a little bit deeper. The limit, I may have been 10, and I caught my limit, and off that spot. So the second day, I went back, and they had moved to 48 foot, 46 to 48 foot, and I couldn't figure out why they would keep going deeper and deeper. But I didn't care as long as I was catching them.
Right.
I was down, I was down to 4 floating worms the last day of the tournament. And Charlie smoked cigarettes, and I'd get a worm, and he'd be kind of gnawed up, where they'd gnawed on it. And Charlie'd get his cigarette lighter and go, ouch, ow, it's hot. And he'd blow it and stick it down in the water, and he'd shape it. He says, I think that looks pretty good, don't you? And it kind of looked like the worm had polio. It was all wadded up, kind of big worm. And I wasn't complaining. So the last day of the tournament, American Sportsman was shooting that show, and it was sponsored by Miller Beer. And it was a big, big event. And I had caught my limit the first day and the second day, and no one else had caught a limit. So I felt real good. So I went back to my spot, and my right hand pointing up to heaven, they went to 52 feet. Those fish, they moved 18 feet in the course of 3 days, or maybe 20 feet in the course of 3 days. They kept going down. Well, the water was going up, the levels. I don't know if they had I don't know if Clark Hill had a hydroelectric dam or not, but something drove them deeper. And I threw out deep, boom, boom, boom. Well, I was catching them. I never caught a big one. I caught some threes and some 2.5s, which are good sized fish for a tournament. And the American Sportsman, Kurt Gowdy, photographer Bruce Buckley, and I don't remember who was running the camera boat. Lee Wolf was in that boat. I don't know if you remember Lee Wolf, one of the old timers, and Joan Wolf. Anyway, they pulled up. How you doing? And I said, well, we're just working on the limit. And I said, well, and I set the hook. I said, and then when and I said, I looked at Charlie. Charlie said, that's a good fish. I said, I know it is. And I just took my time, and I got it up. And it went, and it jumped about that high out of the water. And they went, missed that jump. Missed that jump. Stupid me. I knew better. I had the fish right to the boat, getting ready to get him. And Buckley said, let him swim back out just a little bit and see if we can get him to jump again.
Oh my
And Charlie
gosh.
went,
During the tournament.
like an idiot. Yeah, it was a winning fish. And I let him go out a little bit. He kind of wallered on the water, and the hook came out. And he went down. And they said he weighed 8.5 pounds. He didn't. He weighed about 5. To make it the drama, and Bill Ross, an 8.5 pound bass. I did. He was about a 5 pounder. So anyway, I kept on. I got my limit. And I kept thinking about that big fish. I said, and Charlie says, you heard me go. When he said, let him jump again, I said, I knew better to do that. I don't know why I did it, Charlie. So I go in, and I was in first place. And everybody was saying, congratulations, congratulations. Well, Rayo Breckenridge was coming down the lake. I'd weighed in, and there wasn't but about a couple of boats left. Roland was one, and Rayo was the other. Well, Rayo broke down about a quarter of a mile from the weigh-in. Well, Roland got hooked up, and he pulled him in. And fast forward, Rayo came in. I loved Rayo. He was a great guy. We fished a lot together. He just lived up the road here at Beach Grove, Arkansas. But he won the tournament. And he beat me, I think, by about 1.5 pounds. And Diane, my wife, in there. And she always said, everything happens for a reason. I'll never forget that. She always said, everything happens for a reason. Well, I was standing there, knew I had it won. And when Rayo, I tried to keep a smile, but I was crying behind my smile, I guess. I wasn't really, but I just went, gosh. And she walked over. She got my hand. She said, look at me. She said, you remember me telling you everything happens for a reason? And I said, yeah. She said, well, I'm going to tell you something you don't know. Rayo is a farmer, and he's had 2 bad years. Price on cotton, price on beans, corn had fluctuated and was extremely low priced a bushel. So and then the following year was another bad year. And she said, what you don't know, Marilyn is going blind. That's his wife. And I said, really? I didn't know that. And she said, she told Diane, girls all got together, she said, I sure hope, I know you won't be able to win this tournament, but I sure hope Rayo wins it because we need the money for the
Oh,
eye
wow.
operation. And when Vivian told me that, I said, that feeling, that deep, gnawing feeling, just left. And I walked back over to Rayo. I said, a while ago, I wanted to hit you right in the face. And he laughed, and, but
Because you beat
I
me,
gave him a
right?
big hug. Then I went over, I hugged Marilyn, and she said, Bill, thank you for not winning this tournament. And so I walked
Wow.
back over to Diane. And she said, remember, everything happens for a reason. And that's the way it turned out. I wasn't supposed to catch that fish. Uh,
Wow. That would have won you the tournament, and it would have cost Rayo's wife. Wow. That's an amazing
it
story,
what
Bill. That's an amazing story. That really is.
it hurt. It was bitter, 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 bittersweet. Yeah, it turned sweet, after, but
Yeah.
that was the closest I ever came to winning a classic. I don't know. It was just, it happened for a reason.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Fish Tales. Appreciate you checking us out. Also, check out the Livingston Lure app if you get a chance. All kinds of great information on there. And be sure to subscribe and to like Fish Tales. Back to the show. We're dear friends with Johnny Morris. I mean, you guys are pretty good friends. And you guys, when I was at the Hall of Fame with you guys, we were at the Hall of Fame last year. Skeet was inducted to the Hall of Fame. And I got to see a lot of cool pictures and a lot of history of you and Johnny way back in the very beginning of your relationship in retail, because arguably you have been more influential in selling fishing tackle and stuff that you've marketed than anybody else in the fishing industry. And I got to believe that relationship with Johnny had to be really important to you.
Well, Johnny and I have, he's one of my best friends. And he is the same Johnny today as he was. Our friendship goes back 52 years. And it started on Table Rock Lake. I won a tournament, a BASS tournament, and he fished that tournament. And that's where I first met Johnny. And we became just buddies, But over the years, our friendship grew and grew and grew and grew. And I've watched his family grow. He's got a little grandson right now. He named Catfish. Catfish calls me, and Johnny calls and says, Catfish wants to talk to you, Bill. And I talked to him and sent him a teacup and sent him a Bill Dance shirt. But anyway, he was the cutest little thing in the world.
Yeah.
And he's got his granddaughter he named Angelfish. And he's got another little grandson he named Buck. So he's named them after, nicknamed them all. I talk to Johnny probably, or we communicate.
So I know you grew up with legends. Also, Roland Martin was also a good friend of yours. And again, in the early days, Johnny Morris, Roland Martin, Hank Parker. It's like, I look at the list of guys, I've seen all the pictures of you guys together because I was just a fan. The early days of you guys growing up with Roland Martin, Hank Parker, Johnny Morris, those days.
Johnny is the same Johnny today as he was 50-something years ago when our friendship started. And over the years, it's gotten better and better and better. And when I signed on with Walmart, he called me one night and he said, look, if anything ever happens with you and Walmart, you better call me. Well, I got a call from Sam Walton's brother, Bud, had an advertising agency in Kansas City. And this girl that worked there, she called me and she said, Bill, you gave us a 5% discount last year. And this year we need another 5%. And I said, Ellen, I can't do that. I can't do it. That's 10%. I said, 10% isn't going to hurt y'all. 100% is not going to hurt y'all, but it'll hurt me. And I can't do that. And she said, you mean to tell me the biggest retailer in the country, and you're saying no to it? And I said, yes, ma'am. I'm saying no, I cannot do it. And she said, well, I'll tell you what you need to do. You need to think about this a couple of days and let me call you back. And I said, Ellen, I don't have to think about it. I read my lips. I cannot do it. And she said, well, it's Friday. I'm going to call you Monday, and you tell me what you think. I said, it's not going to change. I was going to ask you to cut the first 5, but I'm sure I can't go 10. And next year it'll be 15. And I'm not going to do it. I hung up the phone and I called Johnny. I said, you remember you telling me one time that if anything happened to Walmart? And he said, Bill, I'm getting excited. I'm getting excited. Are you fixing to tell me something that I really want to hear? And I said, yeah. And he said, book it. He always sticks his thumb up. Book it.
Right.
And he said, I just hoped someday this would happen. And he screamed out, we're sponsoring Bill Dance.
Oh my gosh.
And I told him what had happened with Walmart. He said, well, don't worry. He said, we'll make that 10 up. And I said, I appreciate you, Johnny. And so Johnny and I have been together. We've fished all over the country, and we've done a lot of stuff at NASCAR races. I called Stephanie yesterday. Johnny and I, in about 2 weeks, are either going for Bull Shoals crappie, these big black crappies, I mean, real nice ones, 13, 14-inch, 15-inch black crappie, or we're going below Bull Shoals Dam and fish for brown trout. I said, you pick the fish you want if you want to go catch crappie. But I think we'll end up going down below the White River, and fish for.
And that's coming up. You're gonna do that pretty soon. That's coming up for you.
Yeah, the next few weeks. I called Stephanie and I said, tell him we need to do a crappie show sometime in the next few weeks, and don't book anything. This is a hard time to get Johnny to get Johnny booked because he's hunting all the time. He goes everywhere hunting, and but he booked it. He said, tell Bill, or I'll call him and tell him I'm on. I can say, well, I'm on.
Wow. Bill, we've had an hour and a half, almost 2 hours, and I could talk to you for 2 hours more. This has been a blessing. I love hearing your stories, and man, I have a bunch of notes. I never even got to all my great questions because I knew we were just going to talk about memories.
Well, let's do it again. Hey, do it again. I'm always available somewhere.
I'll talk to Pamela. I'd love to do it again and pick up so many more questions I have for you. I got to go pick my daughter up from school. I retired from fishing now. I'm doing the full-time dad thing, and I'm like, it's 3:00. So here in Texas, it's time to go pick up my high school daughter, and she's got homecoming coming up. So I was able to get like 2 hours with you before school pickup. And it's been a joy, Bill. I love our friendship for the last 30, 40 years. And I've been a fan of yours since I was just a little kid watching you on television. So it's a dream come true, man. It really is.
Well, thank you so much. Listen, I'm as close as your phone, and thank you for the interview. I enjoyed talking to you and mostly getting to visit with you again. It's been a while. So, like I say, anytime you've got my number, I've got your number. If you need something, call me and I'll do it.
Sure will, Bill. Thank you very much. And thank you, Pamela, too. I want to thank your daughter for being such an integral part of making this all happen. You and Pamela, I owe you guys the world. And we're out. Fishtails is saying signing off, buddy.
Fishtails has been brought to you by Livingston Lures. Learn more at livingstonlures.com. Fishtails is also supported by these fine sponsors: Trika Fishing, Mercury Outboards, and Canis Boats.